Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about a missing persons case, emphasis on the persons. We're going to be talking about two people who went missing today. But you might think, eternity, what do these two people have in common? Well, it was a mother and daughter who went missing only a year apart. When I was reading on this case, I was in complete shock about the amount and lack of detail there is on this case, and I figured I'd share it with you all. So let's jump right into it. In 1978, Korrina Malinoski, a 16-year-old girl, had given birth to a beautiful baby girl named Annette Saggers. She made sure to keep the child's father secret for reasons unknown. After Annette's birth, Korrina worked very hard to raise her little girl as a single mother, and she also had help of family members Leon and Sandy. In 1981, when Korrina was just 20 years old, she had met someone named Stephen Malinoski, and who at the time was 32 years old. Stephen had recently left the army and had been taking up a lot of odd jobs, which made him travel all around the country. The couple had actually met at a carnival where Stephen was working as a conry, and the two ended up getting married in Texas only 6 months after they had met on October 16th, 1981. Shortly after getting married, Stephen had actually landed a job as a caretaker. The job that Stephen got was actually based in South Carolina, so the family of three actually ended up moving to South Carolina, which was in 1982. The area of Stephen's job was located near a lot of swamp area and wetlands, and it was about 30 miles away from Charleston. Korrina had got a job at an Oasis convenience store in a nearby Somerville. That same year, Korrina and Stephen's first child, a son named Thomas, was born, and their second son, James, was also born 2 years later in 1984. Korrina's first daughter, Antoinette, was regarded as a very sweet and smart little girl, and she was well liked by all her teachers and classmates. Though one of Antoinette's 6th grade teachers had reportedly claimed that she thought something was very off with Antoinette from the first time she had met her. The family was not always well off. Over time, Korrina and Stephen's marriage began to grow quite rocky, and a lot of Korrina's family claimed that Stephen was into certain substances, and the couple had fought a lot of the time, mainly about Stephen's drinking habits and also his spending habits. It was also pretty well known that Stephen was very abusive towards Korrina, and her family often encouraged her to leave him, telling her that they would be able to take care of her if anything were to fall apart between her and Stephen, and that she just needed a way out. But Korrina chose to stay with Stephen, even though pleas from her family to just leave him. Now we're gonna get into the disappearances. Now, like I said in the beginning of the video, there aren't a lot of details on this, so it's going to be very frustrating when I talk about this, so I do apologize, but I did want to bring awareness to this case. On November 21st, 1987, the day of Korrina's disappearance, Korrina and Stephen had a huge argument. Apparently, Korrina had mentioned something about Stephen's drinking, and according to Stephen, the fight just got very hectic and very violent very quickly, so Korrina ended up leaving to go for a drive. She left the Mount Holly plantation. She was driving nearby Highway 52 sometime between 11 and 11:30 p.m. and she never returned back that night. The next day was November 22nd, 1987, and Korrina did not show up for work at the Oasis convenience store. This was way out of character for Korrina, and her boss began to worry. So her boss's name was Bruce Clarkson, and he began looking for her, thinking that maybe her car broke down somewhere and she was needing help. He headed towards the most obvious place first, which was Korrina's house, and found her car parked and locked outside the gated entrance on the plantation. No sign of Korrina was shown in her car or in her home. He also claimed that there was a layer of dew on the car, which would indicate that the car may have been sitting there all night long. Later that day, Stephen filed a missing persons report and called Korrina's brother, Leon, to inform him that Korrina had disappeared and he had no idea where she was. After this missing persons report was filed, authorities began searching the area where Korrina lived at, and they ended up finding absolutely nothing. They found no signs of a struggle, no foul play, no items belonging to Korrina missing, and the idea that Korrina might have just gotten up and left her kids seemed very unbelievable to those who were very close to her. But then they began to think that maybe somebody took her against her will, and even the unthinkable, maybe somebody had murdered Korrina. Stephen obviously was one of the prime suspects in this case, and he ended up taking a polygraph test regarding his wife's disappearances. And it turns out that the polygraph was inconclusive. I also want to point out that polygraph tests are not always reliable, so we can't just say just because they're inconclusive that means that he had something to do with Korrina's disappearances. So there have been absolutely no leads in Korrina's case. I mean, the authorities tried their best to find someone, a prime suspect, who had something to do with her disappearance, and the case basically just went cold afterwards. That was until October 4th, 1988, just 11 months after her mother's disappearance. Annette Saggers, which was Korrina's daughter, walked to her school bus stop on Highway 52 with her dog, as she did every school day. She was wearing red pants, a red shirt, and white shoes. Around 7 a.m., she was seen waiting patiently at the bus stop by the bus driver as he made the stop across the road. No other children were picked up around this area that Antoinette was picked up, so authorities aren't quite sure if it was actually Antoinette that the bus driver was seeing or was it another child. However, the bus driver had ended up stopping at Antoinette's stop around 20 minutes later, and the 11-year-old was nowhere to be seen. While the area wasn't and didn't have a lot of traffic at the time, it also wasn't exactly abandoned, and no one reported seeing Antoinette get picked up by someone else or seeing her walk off. It seemingly seemed like she just vanished. What's also very alarming about Antoinette's disappearance is that her stepfather, Stephen, didn't even realize that she was missing until around 4 p.m. that day, when she didn't show up after school. And also found out that she never even showed up to class. When Stephen set out to find his stepdaughter, Antoinette, he actually stumbled upon a crumbled up piece of paper that was written out of a loose leaf paper. And the note read, "Dad, Mom came back. Give the boys lots of kisses and hugs, and also you too. Love, Antoinette." There were several words crossed out and added in this clearly quite hastily written note. Around 4:15 p.m., Stephen had alerted authorities to Antoinette's disappearance, and he actually turned in the note to law enforcement, and handwriting experts would later confirm that the writing samples provided were actually Antoinette's writing, but they were not able to identify if Antoinette written this note under distress or if she simply just wrote the note. And oddly enough, Antoinette's dog is also missing and was never found by authorities. Following Antoinette's disappearance, the home of Antoinette and the surrounding area were thoroughly searched on foot and from air. Again, just like her own mother, there were absolutely no signs of Antoinette. Since the day of both Korrina and Antoinette's disappearance, there have been absolutely no signs from either Korrina or Antoinette, nor have there been any signs of their bodies, or any solid clues as to what might have happened to them. An anonymous letter was actually sent to the local police department in 2000, which claimed that Korrina and Antoinette were buried somewhere in the Sumter County along South Carolina, along with a detailed map of the location of where the bodies were supposedly buried. Police thoroughly searched that area and on the detailed map, and the search came up empty. But we also have to remember, back in 1987, crime scene investigation techniques were simply just not advanced enough to really hone in on any minor details that might have been left by Antoinette or her mother. Since the lack of evidence is so apparent in this case, all we have to fall on is just sheer speculation, and actually authorities have about 3 theories about what might have happened to Antoinette and Korrina. The first theory, which a lot of people think is very unlikely to happen, is that both Antoinette and Korrina were both kidnapped and murdered. The likeliness of this happening is just extremely rare, especially because it was around the same area where Korrina was last seen, near Highway 52. It's just extremely unlikely. It almost seemed like it was almost planned in a way, because it's only a year later. Could somebody have been watching that spot? Could it have been Korrina? Maybe they wanted to run away and start a new life together. I mean, it could be possible, but then again, I don't think that this theory really stands with me too much. I know that authorities have been investigating a possible serial killer, but it just seems that these two disappearances are obviously connected. But do I think that it's a serial killer? I would not agree with the serial killer idea, because usually serial killers do have an MO, whether that be adults, children. It's usually never to be both adult and a child. So we can just assume that maybe this theory has some type of evidence towards it, but not really. The other theory is that maybe Stephen had something to do with Korrina's disappearance, and maybe Antoinette's disappearance had to do with a stranger. While this could be possible, it's highly unlikely that this took place at the same exact time. I mean, just think about it. The same location, she's there, Antoinette is there, and don't get me wrong, the story that Steven gave was very suspicious, considering the fact that he stated that Korrina had left in her car to go to Highway 52 just for a drive. But then when her boss had came in, he saw that there was dew on the car, as if the car had been sitting there. Very suspicious. That's not to say that Steven cannot be a suspect in Korrina's disappearance. But what makes it very odd is the fact that Antoinette disappeared in the same location. That to me just rings alarm bells in my head, and it just seems like it was a plot. And yes, while Steven might have done something to Korrina, what would be his reasoning for him to do anything to Antoinette? I mean, could possibly Antoinette have seen something? Maybe that's possibly why. Maybe she threatened to say that she was going to tell the police about it. It's just, there's just too much speculation going on for us to really pinpoint what this theory is really actually saying. And of course, the last theory is that Korrina possibly ran away from her abusive husband and ended up taking Korrina with her. This is the most positive theory, but I would say if she had the options to change her identity and change her daughter's identity without getting caught, it could possibly happen, but it's very unlikely. That's the only thing that I have with this specific theory. No one has spotted them, no one knows anything about them, and for Korrina to just leave absolutely no evidence, and also she left her car back at her house, where could she have gone without being spotted? Hopefully this theory is true, because that just means that her and Korrina are at peace. But also, if that is the case, maybe she would have reached out to family by now, especially because it was only her and her daughter. And also the fact that the dog was never found is also interesting, because did they take the dog with them? I mean, how would they be able to keep that dog with them? It just seems very, very odd. But this theory is most hopeful, and I hope that this theory is true, because it would be amazing to know that they're both alive and well. And another thing to note is that there were absolutely no signs of a struggle at both scenes of the crime. So maybe that is the plausible theory. I mean, I do like this theory, and realistically, I would like to believe that this did happen, but I also do look at Steven as a prime suspect as to what happened to Korrina. But again, this is all just speculation. We don't have any evidence to say that this happened. This is all just theories. Anyways, guys, tell me your thoughts down below. What do you guys think? Which theory do you guys think is the most plausible? Have you guys heard of this case? Let me know down in the comments below, and please follow and subscribe for more true crime. Thank you guys so much.